Recording commencing.
Hi. Hello. Hello. This is our normal pre-church awkward dancing.
Remember when I just told you that the iPad updated and I'm like,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if it could handle it?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think it's handling it.
Oh, how come?
Because that's what Apple does when you have older products and then it installs the new.
Well, yes, that. But I meant, what do you mean it's not handling it?
Like, did you see how it was kind of like stuttering and
Oh.
it's back to smooth now. Speaking of smooth, that's what we do. We do smooth productions. Welcome to Sojourn Grace Collective, everybody. Slightly different Virch Church experience than what you might be expecting.
We're not actually here right now. You used to call it, what did you call it?
Not quite live or partially live?
It doesn't make any sense. Anyway.
That's to me.
We're recording this in our garage on Friday. And then we'll play it on the internet on Sunday, which is not normally how we do.
That's right.
And that's very important to us. We like being live with you so that we can actually interact with you and actually be with you. So this is, just know that if we're doing this, it's because just a lot of things happened that made it have to be that way this week.
Yeah.
So a lot of sore throats and a lot of out of town
Travelage?
airplaneage and sore throatage.
I will probably
And
be
here we are.
in the air when this airs. I
think
will
so.
be flying over a state.
I will not.
I was going to try to predict what state, but you know me on geography. I don't know what state I will be
You'd
flying
probably end up
over.
saying a state that you won't be flying over.
Alaska. I'll be flying over Alaska right now.
That's not happening. Anyway, so here we are. And instead of our normal Virch, we are going to play for you, bring on to the video,
Yeah.
Brian McLaren.
Hey,
our
B-Mac.
favorite. Literally, Sojo would not be Sojo were it not for Brian McLaren. Colby just got up and left me. I don't know what's happening. So. Anyway, that's what's true about Brian.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be here were it not for Brian, and we love him, and he's a dear friend, and he just wrote another book. Is it the 512th book?
I believe it is, number 604,000.
Oh, 512 to 604,000. Okay.
Yeah. Do I stay Christian? I should just keep it back here in the plane of focus. This book comes out. Let's see. You'll be seeing this on Sunday. It comes out on Tuesday. This is an advanced copy, and I loved it. And
We love Brian.
yeah, I was like, where do
Why'd
I
you
go
look
with
at
that?
me like that? That was awkward.
I might edit that part out. I'm just kidding. I'm not editing any of this. I loved it. And so we asked if Brian would come and share with our Sojourn community. He came and spoke at Sojourn 6 years ago
been a while,
or something
yeah.
like that. And there's so many things out of here that he could have pulled from, and I love what he ended up pulling from.
Oh,
And
you do? I haven't heard it yet.
Yeah. Oh, he's going to talk about Jesus and non-dualism.
Cool.
So
I love it. Very Sojo-y.
Very
It all belongs to me.
Sojo-y. Yep.
Cool.
Joey. So before we get into Brian, we just got a couple
Could be Chandler, or you could be Joey.
couple house notes. Is that what's his face? Ben Rector. So yes, great.
Dynamic
If
duo.
you missed the announcements happening all week this week, Sojo is delighted to be hosting Gunger as he comes through San Diego for his tour. So come on out. That's Friday, June 10th. So mark your calendar and then get tickets at sojourngrace.com. Scroll down and you can see there's a spot to get tickets there. And the tickets are donation based, which is to say, just come. Like, everybody come. If you can't afford it, get your tickets so you still have something to scan or whatever on your phone. But you can, if you need to put zero in the donation, that's totally fine. We don't want money to be a barrier. We want everybody to come. And then if you want to donate something, our suggested donation is $20. But honestly, just whatever you can do, come on out Friday, June 10th, 7 p.m. at St. Luke's Episcopal Church in North Park,
Our
which
new location.
is our next announcement. Bum-ba-da-bum. As we've been talking about for a few weeks, we're going to be going back to in-person services beginning on July 3rd.
Finally.
It has happened to me. Is that not where you're going with that?
And then we'll keep doing Virch Church every Sunday when we do that in the morning.
Both and.
And then do we have another announcement, or is that it?
I'm like, let's say a bunch of things about this. You're like, and then the next announcement
Nope.
is just
already said all
if
of
you want to support If you want to support Sojourn Grace, if you want to be a part of the community of people that help our virtual services happen, that will help us return to in-person service, that will support what we do here, which is to foster social, spiritual, and emotional wholeness, to provide safe landing places for those who are in a deconstruction journey or sort of needing just a community of like-valued people to heal and belong, then you can do that at sojourngrace.com/donate or Venmo at Sojourn Grace. Okay.
We love y'all, and we miss you when we're not with you. And you can still talk to each other. That's the cool thing about when these videos premiere is you can still interact with each other in the comments like you always do. It's just we won't be seeing them via the video space. Anyway. And back to regular things next week.
Yes.
This was just a one-off.
One-off.
Again. Ow! Just bit my knee.
Why did you do that?
Because he's Gilbert. Mom, I see your flesh. I'm going to bite it. It's just what he does.
Okay. We had churched.
Did we just church? Is that what we did?
It happened. So please enjoy this talk from our friend and mentor and sage.
So grateful to him and thankful that he's here this morning.
Brian
so enjoy.
D. McLaren.
Love y'all. Colby will freeze the weirdest of those faces and then put it all over the internet forever.
What I do. It's not what I do. End recording.
Hi, friends. Such a great honor to get to share with you today. My topic is Jesus Beyond Dualism. Many of you know I have recently written a book called Do I Stay Christian? And I think for more and more people, the question of Christian identity is it's front burner. For a lot of people, it has to do with the fact that they see what Christians do. It's in the headlines every week. This or that Christian leader, this or that Christian denomination. And they just find what they're doing mortifying and embarrassing. But not just that, they feel it's harmful and it's dangerous. And they just think, I don't think I want my name, and I certainly don't want my money associated with some organization doing this much damage and harm to people who I care about. And not only people, so many Christians are so obsessed with where they go after they die that they don't seem to care about this earth while they're alive. And when we live in a time of such environmental catastrophe, caring about the earth just seems like such a baseline of moral sense and moral goodness. They just think this religion won't wake up and mobilize its resources to try to protect the earth from corporate greed and human ignorance and all the rest. So for a whole lot of reasons, we have a lot of people who are thinking about leaving Christianity. And one of the deepest things that I think is driving people from the faith is that people outgrow dualism, and every version of Christianity that they know of is thoroughly dualistic. And so what I'd like to talk about is the fact that I think from the start, Jesus was beyond dualism, and the movement he started was a post-dualist or non-dualist movement. But the Christian religion just hasn't quite caught up to Jesus yet. Now, that, of course, begs the question, what is dualism? And the simplest definition of dualism is just to say that dualism means seeing the world in terms of two. Us, them, in, out, good, bad, friend, enemy, righteous, unrighteous, saved, unsaved, blessed, damned. Those kinds of dualisms are the framework in which a whole lot of Christianity functions. And they have nothing or almost nothing that goes beyond that binary way of thinking. Now, I'm not saying that thinking in terms of two is bad. I'm just saying it's not the whole story. And a lot of people have tried to describe this move beyond dualism. My dear friend and colleague, Richard Rohr, talks about the first half of life and the second half of life. The first half of life, where we're obsessed with dualisms and getting all of our dualisms straight, dividing the world into twos, Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, socialist, capitalist, all of this that energizes so much of our public life is first half of life work. And then you get more and more of us get to a point in life, and I think we're getting there younger and younger, where we just see that dualism, as useful as it is, also causes harm. Richard has a slightly more complex way of talking about it, where we have an early period of order, and the order is primarily dualistic, and then that order collapses. We go through a period of disorder or deconstruction, and then we begin to try to put things together again in some new way, a new reordering. When I've written about this, both in this new book, Do I Stay Christian, and in my previous book, Faith After Doubt, I've talked about 4 stages. And in many ways, the first 2 stages are parts of order, or parts of the first half of life, or are parts of dualism. First is simplicity, then comes complexity, then comes perplexity, and then comes harmony or solidarity. And I need to say that any kind of diagram like this can be a useful tool, but it also can be a weapon. Beware of people who create a hierarchy of stages and put themselves or their group at the top stage and use that as a justification to look down on and condemn and despise everyone in lower stages. That's why I actually prefer not to use a linear image, but to use the image of rings on a tree. And I'll get there in just a minute. But when it comes to dualism, if you think of it like this, when we're little children, it doesn't matter our culture, our religion, our politics, there are matters of survival that our parents have to teach us. Safe, dangerous. Edible, yucky, poison, dangerous. Don't eat that. Friend, stranger. Safe, dangerous. You see, those dualisms are matters of survival for us. And that simple dualism gets us started. And when we're really young and our parents say, don't touch that, if we say why, they'll say, because I said so. Because at this point, you don't understand electricity that's running through that little device. And if you were to touch it, you might get a shock. We don't have time to explain that. And right now, all the mom or dad has to say is, because I said so. That's what we might call authoritarian dualism. And then in complexity, we grow up a little bit and we realize that you aren't allowed to touch that, but we paid that electrician to come into the house and he was allowed to touch it. So it's not a moral absolute. There's fuzzy edges. And there are complications and there's fine print, so to speak. We might visit a friend's house and our friend, they have a different set of rules in their house than we have in our house. And we start to realize, so that simplicity has fuzzy edges. And then we get to a stage where we become angry. We realize our parents told us this, or our church told us this, or our country told us this. And that wasn't the whole truth, or they were hiding something, or they used that truth to hurt people. And then we move through that relativistic, skeptical, maybe anti-dualist stage. And some of us move into a non-dual stage that's integral and holistic and learns to realize, of course you need to teach children some of those simple life and death matters using dualistic language. But of course you need to help people grow beyond that too. So we could see this even in the Bible. We have the early period of the Bible where we have patriarchs. There's no law, there's no religious structure, there's no temple, there's no priesthood. It's just powerful men are in charge back in ancient history, and sadly too often today. And it's something is right because the leader of your tribe or clan says it's right. And then we move into a period of law. And this is very similar, I think, to what I call complexity. And the laws become very complex because now we don't just want to depend on a person. We want to depend on a concept or a set of concepts that might be explained in a document. And then we move into a stage in the Bible with the prophets and the philosophers and the poets where they say, you know what, you guys, you can obey all the law and still be a rotten person. You can obey the law and go through all the rituals and not take care of the widows and the orphans and the aliens and the refugees. And so they challenge the dualism. That's the classic work of perplexity, what I call stage 3. And then we see Jesus show up and say, you know what's really important? Love is really the most important thing. And so if you think of it like rings on a tree, you start with this sort of skeleton of dualism and right and wrong, and authority figures tell you what's right and wrong. And then you develop principles and concepts of complexity. And then you critique that and you see that the world is bigger than can be contained in any kind of dualism. And that's when you move beyond dualism into harmony and solidarity and compassion. So I'd like to just give you a quick kind of guided tour into seeing Jesus as someone leading us beyond dualism, as a performance artist who stages demonstrations and happenings and street theater to sort of to draw people into experiences beyond dualism. And then you see him in conversation with people where he often answers questions with questions, as if to say, what you really need is not an answer, you need to think. And so I'm going to invite you and lead you into thinking. You need to have second thoughts, so you challenge some of the assumptions that are even behind your question. Or you could think of Jesus as the guru, the guy who utters koans or enigmatic statements that at first seem to be nonsense, but in the act of thinking about them, you're challenged to think in a broader or deeper way. Largely what I'm suggesting is that Jesus is a non-dual teacher. You see it in the Sermon on the Mount, for example, where he says, do not think I have come to abolish the law and the prophets. Why would he have to say that? Because everybody's about to think he's here to abolish the law and the prophets. You'll see what I mean in just a minute. He says, I've not come to abolish, but to fulfill. And he says, look, I tell you, heaven and earth shall pass away, and not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. In other words, I'm not trying to lower the standard and get rid of the law. I'm trying to take us to a place where the intent of the law is fulfilled. Whoever breaks, he says, one of the least of these commandments teaches us others to do the same, will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. And then here comes the challenge. For I tell you, unless your righteousness or justice surpasses that of the religious leaders who teach you the law and teach you dualism and divide the world into us, them, right, wrong, safe, dangerous, clean, unclean, and have a very neat and tidy world. Unless your justice or righteousness goes beyond them, you're never even going to see the kingdom of heaven. You won't enter it. You won't experience it. You'll be on the outside looking in. And so he isn't living with the dualism of, are you here to maintain the law or abolish the law? None of the above. I want to go beyond maintaining and abolishing to a higher level altogether. I want to fulfill the law. I want to take us where the law was leading us, but we can't stop with law. We have to keep moving into something beyond the dualism of this is clean, that's unclean. These people are good, those people are dirty. And in the rest of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus takes the same pattern and repeats it again and again. You have heard it said, here's the law, here's what you were taught. But I say to you, and if you were to go back and read Matthew chapter 5, you would see this pattern again and again. It's really fascinating. One of the most interesting ones is the last in the series. It's almost the climax of this series. You have heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. The most fundamental dualism, the dualism that launches wars, the dualism that causes violence and killing and genocide and torture. Friend, enemy. I say to you, love your enemy. Pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For God makes the sun and the rain to rise and fall for everybody. God doesn't say, let's bless the crops of good people and let's let those bad people experience drought. God's goodness isn't conditional upon the receiver. It is an expression of the giver. So because God is love, God's love is unconditional. And so Jesus says, be perfect. Bad translation. For a far better translation, be mature, be fully developed. Because God has this non-discriminatory love. He goes beyond determining who's deserving and undeserving, worthy and unworthy. God goes beyond this, Jesus says. And so let's try to keep moving forward ourselves. And let's transcend those dualisms of righteous, unrighteous, friend, enemy. Not to lower the standard, but to move to something more mature. Oh my goodness, one of the most powerful examples of this is in the parable of the Good Samaritan, where a lawyer, by the way, this means a Bible scholar, someone who studies the Bible, says to Jesus, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Which, by the way, we can't import 2,000 years of Christian theology back into this. When this guy says this, he would not be thinking, how do I go to heaven after I die? He would be thinking, what must I do to inherit eternal life, life of the ages? The Greek word is zoin aeonian, life of the eons. What must I do to inherit this higher life that you're talking about? And Jesus answers the question with a question. What is written in the law? You're a legal expert. What does the law say? And he says, quotes a verse from the Bible, love the Lord your God. And then Jesus says, okay, good answer. Do this and you will live. By the way, you can see he's not talking about heaven and hell. He says, do this, not you will go to heaven when you die, but good, you'll have the kind of life that you're looking for. And then he realizes, oh no, I just used this word love, and this isn't so easy to turn into a dualism. I think dualistically. I need to know who is inside on the neighbor requirement and who is outside. And then Jesus tells this story, familiar story. We call it the story of the Good Samaritan. A man is a victim of a horrible crime. He's bloody and beaten up at the side of the road. And two religious leaders come by. And Jesus doesn't have to say this. Everybody would know it. These are religious leaders who know the law. And the law says you are either clean or unclean. And one of the things that can make you unclean is to touch human blood. And so they can't help the guy because their religious requirements inhibit their compassion. And then he says, and then a Samaritan. And as soon as he says Samaritan, you can think of the people who are stigmatized by so many today. I live in Florida, where our governor is just being a pathetic bully by making transgender children the group of people and their families that he can try to bully. It breaks my heart. It's infuriating. Believe me, I'm doing everything I can to try to help us get a better governor next time going around. And you better do all you can too, because he wants to be president. But imagine if Jesus said a transgendered person came down the road, right? Or where I live, a Democrat came down the road, because where I live, Democrats are just considered stupid and evil. And you know all the conspiracy theories that are out there. One of the people who everybody considers bad comes along, and he feels compassion. Compassion goes beyond good and evil, a compassion that says, I'm not thinking about what race you are, what religion you are, what sexual orientation you are, what political party you are. You are a human being who's a victim of a brutal crime, and he helps him. He feels compassion. He gives him first aid, takes him to a hotel. He offers to pay for him to be cared for until he's better. And so then Jesus, once again, answers a question with a question. As it said, the point of this isn't to give you the right answer versus the wrong answer. The point of this is to get you to think, because thinking is what will help you grow beyond dualism, which so often is just repeating what somebody told you, an authority figure told you, and you don't have to think. They do the thinking for you. It's as if Jesus is saying, I'm trying to help you grow up, fella. And so what do you think? who was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands? And by the way, Jesus has reversed this. Instead of saying, he says, who is my neighbor? He says, who acted as a neighbor? And and it's as if this guy can't even bring himself to say the Samaritan, because you can't say the Samaritan is the good guy. That's just inconceivable within the dualistic mindset. The one who showed him mercy. And there's that word mercy or compassion. Go and do likewise, Jesus says. We see the same thing in the parable of that we often call the Prodigal Son, which is a parable of a man who had two sons, older, younger. All of our dualisms, older is superior to younger. And in this story, there are two sons. There are also sons and hired hands and slaves. And if you read the story closely, you start to realize Jesus is playing with all of these social gradations. The slave, a nameless slave in the story, sees more clearly than either of the sons in the story. It's just a remarkable story. But by taking two sons, where we're supposed to have the older is better than the younger, in this story, the older son and the younger son are both stupid. And the older son and the younger son are both beloved. And we end the story with a father who has one son who runs away and wastes all of his inheritance and then comes back. The father welcomes him back, and the older brother gets angry and won't even come into the welcome home party for the younger brother. And the story ends with the father looking at both sons with love, and the older son so angry because the dualisms have been shaken up that he's not sure he's willing to come into the party. The older son thinks of himself as a slave, and the slave in this story is the one who says, your brother has come home and your father has killed the fatted calf because he got him back safe and sound. It's like the slave sees what the son can't see. I mean, what a masterful story to blow up dualism and to invite us into a deeper and wiser way of seeing and way of living. So I suppose my good news for all of you is that if you would like to follow Jesus and Jesus leads you beyond dualism, I can tell you there are a lot of Christians who will tell you you're not a good Christian anymore. But what I want to tell you is they can say whatever they want. We don't live in an authoritarian simplicity where something is true just because somebody says it. Jesus is telling us here that if we, in a sense, stand with God and see God's non-discriminatory love for everyone that loves both sides of the dualism, then we move into a way of being, what's the way of being Jesus advocates? It's the way of being that he says is in sync with the infinite, boundless love of God. And this isn't just a concept to make judgments about, but it's something to experience. So it's the way that we live in this world. So if you are being led beyond dualism, you don't have to leave Christianity. You can if you want to. You don't have to. I think, and in fact, if you stay Christian and keep a non-dual heart, your presence will help nudge Christianity toward the kind of maturity that Jesus embodied and invited us into. Thanks very much.